Well, we have arrived at the moment I was dreading with this show, and it was both more and less bad than I was anticipating. Before I get into that, welcome to this week's House of the Dragon spoiler-free review for Episode 6. I have a little commentary I want to talk about beforehand, mainly because it is connected to this episode. On Friday, Imogen Donovan posted an article on Gaming Bible, a British site. In the article, she quotes Olivia Cooke as saying the showrunners Ryan Condal and Miguel Sapochnik told her that she is a woman for Trump when giving the actress direction for playing Alicent Hightower. I didn't want to give the Trumps any more mental real estate than they already had, the actress continued, showing that Donald Trump lives rent-free in her head just like he does so many in Hollywood. She continued, so I tried to find a different route into her, but I could see what they were saying with this complete indoctrination and denial of her own autonomy and rights. I just couldn't be asked to go down that road. And with that, she shows what most modern feminists and a good portion of the political left hold dear to them, namely a view of history whereby every age and place should live by the societal makeup of California, which is how we wind up with such bad entertainment. Olivia Cooke meanders on with, Alicent has been completely bred to breed, and to breed powerful men. That is her only function in this life, added Cooke. She can tell herself that she's going to sway and nurture and persuade in a very womanly, feminine way, but it's all effing BS. Unless you're fighting the men, you'll never be heard. It's learning to live with this straitjacket of oppression. How do I move inch by inch every single day to loosen the straps? I cleaned that up, by the way. And this was the kind of thing most of us who were questioning this series before the premiere were worried about. Not only was Olivia Cooke one of the more vocally political in the run-up to the premiere of the show, she was saying many of the kinds of things the idiots over at the Rings of Power were saying on their media blitz. Now, Warner Brothers was not stupid enough to hire J.J. Abrams' acolytes, who had one credit to their name after a decade in Hollywood, to run their flagship show. Nevertheless, House of the Dragon developed under a cloud of suspicion due to their stars running their mouths about how political they were and the remnants of hard feelings from Season 8 of Game of Thrones. Up to this point, that has mostly manifested as a couple of irritatingly feminist scenes that do not mesh with the time and setting of the show. For the most part, they can be overlooked because it did not interfere with the overall show. However, we have come to the switchover between the set of Young Rhaenyra and Alicent actresses to the older set. Millie Alcock managed to find herself after a rather stiff first episode and went on to be my second favorite character in the show. Emily Carey, on the other hand, had a less consistent performance. She excelled in the first couple of episodes, only to stumble in the middle. But she rallied and had her best performance in her last episode before handing off to Olivia Cooke. This might actually have been unfortunate in that she reset the bar right before exiting stage left. And I mention that because it makes the context of the article drop even more unfortunate, as, the Friday before she makes her appearance, Olivia Cooke's politics are front and center once more rather than the stories she was hired to help tell. George R.R. Martin's story, not Olivia Cooke's story. And that is the second biggest problem with Hollywood these days. Actors and writers and directors and studio heads seem to think that we give our time and hard-earned money to hear their stories and their politics and their moralizing rather than the stories they are fronting. I've probably lost some of you, so let me, for example, you. Disney now has a formula for their Marvel and Star Wars Disney Plus shows. They slap the name of a well-known character that is liked by many fans of the franchise the show is connected to. They announce the show is about that character. However, what gets released is not Hawkeye, and not Moon Knight, and not Boba Fett, wherein the big-name character is supplanted for someone less likable and usually female. And because the writers are incompetent, the biggest problem Hollywood has, by the way, They have to deconstruct the big-name character that fans loved to make the female character better, usually by turning them into a useless mess that is eventually saved by the Mary Sue that they have written because Hollywood writers don't know how to write strong female characters anymore. They used to. That is a dying art now. House of the Dragon managed to actually do it through 5 episodes, even as their direct competition over at Amazon was basically holding a masterclass on what not to do when writing female characters. They have made their central character the biggest problem with the show with seeming ease. Which brings me around to this week's spoiler-free review. I tried to keep the semi-rant to a minimum, but this week needed setting up as we transition from Millie Alcock / Emily Carey to Emma Darcy / Olivia Cooke. Once more, we will go in the order that issues and high points occurred in the show. I want to start off by mentioning the opening sequence. I don't think I have mentioned House of the Dragon's opening sequence, but I have definitely mentioned the opening of Rings of Power, and that is because Amazon got robbed by whatever digital artist put that opening together. House of the Dragon, however, has an opening that is very interesting. It is not as good as Game of Thrones' opening, but it is still pretty good, with music that stirs the soul, ramping up your interest in what this week is bringing. That digital artist delivered, and the music director is also on point. We open with Olivia Cooke getting off on the wrong foot. I know she can act, and therefore I wonder if her performance is meant to be that disagreeable, but she basically threw Emily Carey's excellent Episode 5 performance out the window. Then we get dragons whose CGI is vastly improved over that first ghastly sequence where a young Rhaenyra lands in the courtyard and the dragon looked about as real as a $3 bill. From the younger dragons we see later to the older dragons we see first, they look much, much better. I'm still not sold on their design, but that may be because I have years and years of watching shows with dragons in them, and that is what my brain expects to see. Also, once again, I'm a Game of Thrones normie, so I'm not sure what the dragons looked like in Game of Thrones. We also get to see the set of royal offspring that have been birthed both between this episode and last, as well as grown versions of Alicent's children. Nothing much stuck out except for Aegon, the eldest of Alicent's sons, is too stupid to be king. What the hell have Viserys, the royal tutors, and Alicent been doing since his birth? Was he dropped on his head? Whatever is wrong with him, he is definitely a Targaryen, above and beyond the hair. Oh, and his looks as bad as everyone else's in his house. Is there no royal barber? A nursemaid to teach him what to do with those albino locks? Last episode. Oh, if you have not seen last episode, this might be a mild spoiler for you. I'll do the 3, 2, 1 all clear for those who want to mute this part. Anyway, last episode we left Sir Criston Cole about to seppuku himself in the royal garden after beating Laenor's lover to death when Alicent stops him. It was because the idiot suggested Criston Cole's affair with Rhaenyra would be safe with him and Laenor after Laenor and Rhaenyra marry. All clear. Criston Cole was a good character right up until the end of episode 4 when things start to go off the track. He was one of the few admirable characters on this show, which I suppose should have been a warning to all and sundry, but unfortunately I'm a Game of Thrones normie. To keep it spoiler-free, let's just say the new Criston Cole is a bit of an arse. Oh, and the commander of the City Watch is an idiot. He does not have many lines, and he seemed a much better character than the first episode where I vaguely remember him also being an arse. His arseness winds up costing more than himself. Then we get introduced to a little more of Laena Velaryon, the eldest daughter of Lord Corlys Velaryon. We briefly met her in the last episode at the ball. She was a good character, having stayed with Daemon. Daemon, however, was, diminished? He was definitely toned down in this episode. There was no Matt Smithiness coming out. It was around this point in the episode that I had come to decide that Emma Darcy was not letting Millie Alcock down as she took over the role of Rhaenyra. Her first scene was well acted, and her interactions with her husband Leonor, the Queen, her father, they were all good, but it was the first scene. As the show went on, she remained solid. I can't say she has taken Millie Alcock's slot as the second best character, since this episode didn't really have a first best character. I might put that crown on Lena now that I think about it. I know there wasn't a second best. And it wasn't because this episode was bad by any stretch of the imagination. To put it in perspective, I would say nearly every episode has become the best so far. This episode would have had to be perfectly written and acted to do that again, since we had such a huge time jump. Also, we have been inching our way towards a civil war, and there are few admirable characters under such circumstances. This one is no different. The weasels have abounded thus far, and this week they seem to have multiplied since last we saw Westeros. And since we're talking about weasels, I have to mention the man they are all jockeying to influence. Paddy Considine has been masterful in portraying a weak king in decline, and this week I have to say, the makeup department has been just masterful in aging him slowly, but ever so barely noticeable to this point. This week they killed it. Viserys looked like he was a hard 70. Everything from his thinning face to his nearly gone hair was excellent. During last episode, we got a little more of the youngest son of Lord Strong, Larys Strong, and brother of the idiot commander of the City Watch that I mentioned earlier. He was in the garden last episode, chatting up the Queen. This episode, he shows himself to be a real piece of work. I had a feeling he was less than savory, and this week we find out how unsavory. I also have to mention the race swapping of House Valyrian. It was always going to be a problem given that Westeros is not where people of dark skin tones live in the world George R.R. Martin wrote. Like real life in a pre-industrial world, Martin wrote peoples as being separated by geography, and the trouble long-distance travel is under such circumstances. Unfortunately, the showrunners who decided to adapt Martin's work felt there would be too many white people on the screen. Their words, not mine. If they kept his ethnic distribution conventions. Like most of Hollywood, they think everything has to look like California. The problem arises when you have a nearly albino Princess Rhaenyra married to a half-black Leonor Velaryon and produce kids. Anyone who reads the books already knew this was going to be a problem with the story from Fire and Blood. It makes the storyline of this week's episode weaker than it should have been. It also brings back up the stupidity of the why of making the Velaryons black. Nearly any other house would have been better and made more sense given where the story goes. Whatever. Hollywood will Hollywood. And we come to my last comment before putting this one to bed. Over the course of episode 6, I came to the conclusion that Olivia Cooke's Alicent Hightower is more stupid than Emily Carey's, despite having a decade more to practice being a manipulator and watching the weasels who populate court operate. Despite what she said about her character in the Gaming Bible article, there is no way Alicent would be as... I think naive is the wrong word, but I don't have another that fits. She would not be as naive as this episode suggests she is through her actions and inactions. Can nobles and royals be morons? Of course. They have been in this show already. But Alicent was a smart, if guileless, child in the first couple of episodes. By the end of the last episode, she was a shrewd woman surveying the court and seeing how the wind was blowing, even if it did require her father to show her the way of things. This week's Alicent made mistakes last week's Alicent would not have made. The decade or so jump should have made her craftier than she was portrayed this week, and I hope this is not the direction they are going with her. especially if Olivia Cooke can't find some way to make her less unlikable, even while having her do unlikable things. That is all I have for this week's spoiler-free review of House of the Dragon, Episode 6. I will be back later this week with the spoiler-filled Rings of Power Episode 6 review, sooner if something drops in the news or something of interest pops up. Thanks for watching. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and comment down below to help out with the YouTube algorithm. My social media and Patreon links will be in the description, along with the link to the article I mentioned, and I will be back soon with another video. Bye for now.